welcome to another episode of Bridge the Channel, coming to you after a rather long break that we were not with you. Apologies for this. We promise that it won't take us that long to return to you. We are coming to you after a crisis has erupted in the Middle East, unfortunately, in the time that we were not together. A crisis that actually has had quite a lot of important repercussions for British domestic politics, and this will be the topic of our episode today. Now on to the main topic of this month's episode, which is the new crisis in Gaza and the Middle East and how it affects British politics. First of all, how it affects the British government. You could arguably say that the crisis in Gaza has had an effect on the new crisis that also exists in the British government with the departure of the hardcore ex-Home Secretary Suella Braverman, who was removed due to various controversial statements, one of whom was also calling the massive pro-Gaza and pro-Palestinian demonstrations in London, as call them, hate marches. Again, Braverman was really removed for all kinds of reasons. Fundamentally, she's someone who really wants to be the next leader of the Conservative Party. This is an internal Conservative Party crisis, but it also shows how the Gaza issue can have quite a spillover into British politics. How you deal with demonstrators, to what extent demonstrations, pro-Palestinian demonstrations also have a very unpleasant anti-Semitic connotations, how you balance this with the right to protest and the right of free expression in a democratic crisis in a democratic country such as the UK. This is all really, really important discussions. While you cannot say that the Gaza issue brought about this new crisis in the reshuffle of the British government, you can also say that it contributed to a lot of the fault lines. And of course, we ended up having the most bizarre development of all in a way, which is the return of David Cameron as the new foreign secretary. Perhaps this is the one silver lining for the UK out of this. While Cameron is quite not terribly beloved, he's probably very indifferent at this point for the vast majority of British voters, he does create a new era of some kind of a statesmanship over the last few months of the Sunak government. He's a world leader that other leaders know. He has been quite active in the Middle East. He will be quite active in Europe. So at least out of this crisis, the UK gets a bit heftier and a bit more mature diplomatic representations for the last few months of this Conservative government. Now, we spoke a bit about how the Gaza crisis affects the government, so let's talk a bit about how it affects the Labour opposition. We already said about how many world leaders right now are seeing and treating Keir Starmer as the prime minister in waiting, effectively. Opinion polls really nothing seems to be changing opinion polls here. The Labour Party is way ahead of the Conservative Party. In a way, many people are now banking on trying to understand what the UK will look like with a Labour government moving forward. Well, the Gaza crisis actually perhaps also gives an uncomfortable glimpse into what a Labour government would look like in case the UK has to face difficult diplomatic crises that also have important domestic connotations. The Gaza crisis has been also the first major crisis of Keir Starmer inside the Labour Party. Many of his closest allies have actually resigned his core team, his front bench, as it's called in British politics, of course, because many of them have strong Muslim voter basis. It is not a crisis of leadership for Keir Starmer because nobody is challenging him as a leader, but he has had to balance between what he understands as a very responsible position, trying to defend Israel's right to defend itself and also condemning Hamas, while at the same time trying to have some humanitarian understanding of the crisis, with the big will of many people to actually condemn what they see as the excessive treatment of Palestinians by Israel. Starmer has been quite resolute in holding his position. Right now, as we're recording this, there's actually a truce in Gaza as well, and probably the best way for Starmer to get out of the crisis himself is the situation in Israel and Gaza to kind of diffuse itself a bit as weeks of diplomacy go on. But again, while this is not a major crisis that will keep Keir Starmer from going into Downing Street, it is perhaps a crisis that shows all the troubles that a future Labour government will have in dealing with the world, and particularly trying to balance its Western priorities and its Western interests on the one hand, and the fact that the West is no longer alone in this world, not only internationally, but also inside Western countries itself. So that was another episode of Bridge the Channel, coming to you unfortunately after a long break that has also included the outbreak of a major crisis in Gaza, a big reshuffle and the return of David Cameron to frontline politics in the UK, and the increasingly high profile of Keir Starmer of the Labour Party. All of this sprinkled with a bit of ancient Greek drama or ancient Greek tragedy, you could say. We're going to be with you again before the end of the year to catch up with all the developments in the Gaza war, in British UK, British EU relations, transatlantic relations, and all the other topics that we're covering in Bridge the Channel. Until next time, take care.